call to order the Town of Edgewood Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for May 12th at Edgewood Town Hall. And we'll do a roll call. Commissioner
Seegers.
Commissioner Ray, I was going to say.
Ray's here.
Just Ray. Commissioner Williams, here. Commissioner Benino, here. Commissioner Chavez.
Chavez, here.
Commissioner Chavez will be a commissioner in a moment. So the first item on the agenda is to introduce Adrian. So Adrian has served the town of Edgewood on the Lodgers Tax Board and is wanting to serve the community in a different capacity. And so he was appointed by the governing body at the last commission meeting, I believe it was. And so we have the town clerk, Stephanie Mueller, here, who will administer the oath of office. So, Adrian, if you'll stand. And
Stand, please. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Adrian Chavez,
I, Adrian Chavez,
have been appointed
to
the Planning and Zoning Commission
the Planning and Zoning Commission
for the Town of Edgewood.
for the town of Edgewood.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America,
the Constitution and the laws
the Constitution and the laws
of the State of New Mexico,
of the state of New Mexico,
and the ordinances and resolutions
and the ordinances and resolutions
of the Town of Edgewood.
of the town of Edgewood.
I will faithfully and impartially
I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of this office
discharge the duties of this office
of which I am about to enter,
of which I am about to enter,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Okay, so the first item on the is the approval of the agenda, if I may, Madam Chair. I do have a correction on the action item. The property is owned R1. If you would just delete that portion that says the property is owned C2, that was just a copy and paste error.
So it's all
zoned R1.
R1.
Okay.
Okay. So has everyone had an opportunity to review the agenda, and do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting?
I move we approve the agenda for this evening's meeting.
Discussion, can we do? Okay, I notice on the agenda we don't have the minutes of the previous meeting.
Oh,
Yeah.
I apologize. Yes.
And I didn't know, are you that's something I should have gotten to you?
No.
No, Courtney does
We
that,
do.
right?
We do
That's
have them.
what I thought.
We'll have to defer that till the next meeting. I apologize. Yeah.
So let's before we do the approval of the agenda, let's go back to approve the minutes of the meeting from April 14th of 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting?
Have you seen the minutes?
Has everyone reviewed the minutes?
I don't have
Were they posted?
They were.
I
we
downloaded
received
what
them
was
in
Okay.
the
Okay,
email.
I just
Okay.
downloaded what was
Okay.
posted, so I didn't have them there. I
Okay, it's just not. It's not on the agenda, so we cannot approve them. We will approve them at the next meeting. I apologize.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so back to approving the agenda for this evening's meetings. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
A second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And the agenda is approved.
Okay. So, Commissioners, I do need to bring to your attention that the applicant for this action is not here. Normally, on if a matter is quasi-judicial, it has come to my attention that if an applicant is not present, we cannot take any action. This, however, is not a quasi-judicial proceeding. This is an interesting anomaly in the subdivision ordinance. Here's Garrett. So, let the record show that Commissioner Holloman is here. So because this is what is identified in the ordinance, and I'd like to kind of get into the ordinance a little bit because it's kind of an interesting and unique action item. So if you turn to page 21 of the subdivision ordinance.
This is the only,
Do you here?
What page?
Okay, so this is section 12 under the subdivision ordinance. I have it on page 21. You may have it on a different mark, but this is under the subdivision ordinance. And so the section 12 is vacation, and like in the world of land use, vacation has a different connotation than we would like, but a vacation just means a lot line is being eliminated, and if it's an interior lot line, it has specific requirements, and this is what this particular applicant is an interior lot line vacation. So if you go down to B, under vacation 12B, and it says request to vacate an interior lot line and utility drainage easements shall be accompanied by 10 So it gives you a list of what shall be provided. And then below the numbered items, it says interior lot line vacations shall require an endorsement from the Planning and Zoning Commission. The matter shall be heard during a regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. That is the extent of what is shown in the subdivision ordinance regarding the endorsement of a lot line adjustment for an interior lot line removal or vacation. There is nothing in the definitions as to what endorsement means. So we have to default to the traditional just dictionary definition of endorsement, which basically means we support, approve, recognize, contribute to. So it's not a legal term identified in statute. So it has kind of it's not exactly vague, but it's not like, it doesn't even have the level of approval. So you can approve, I guess we can indicate you could approve the endorsement. And because it's this level, it's going to be up to you if you want to proceed with this with the applicant not being here. If this was a request, for example, for a subdivision, if it was a request for a zone change, if it was a request for a variance, under what I have encountered over the last week, in the 3 days that I was in Las Cruces doing training and learning what I knew and learning what I didn't know, it was a topic of discussion, and the consensus going forward is matters should not be heard if the applicant is not present. If it's a matter that's heard under normal kind of guidelines. This is a different situation. This is almost an administrative function of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So you can, we can hear the matter. It is not open to testimony. So I've provided you with a staff report. We can go through that. But I think your first decision, and you can have this as a discussion initially, as to whether you want to proceed with this or if you'd like to just table it, and we can notify the applicant that they need to be present for this activity.
If we table it, then the applicant there will need to be new letters sent, correct?
Yeah, there is notification under, even in the vacation, it says that letters shall be sent. It does not indicate that there will be any notification in the newspaper. It just says letters will be sent to adjoining property owners. It doesn't even indicate that those property owners have a right to testify. I'm sure they could comment, but I seek clarification, but it would not be testimony. So you would not consider it other than informational.
And the requester has not, we don't know anything about the requester not being able to be here. I mean, is there any
I was
other
not
reason?
contacted. I do know that she did send the letters.
Okay.
So let me
Okay.
just query the audience. Is anybody here as a result of this action?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
so you received the letters?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I would have a,
Would you like to hear from the people that did show up?
Can we take comments at this?
I think it's, I'm always one to try to defer to the people who take the time and effort to come out and and participate in the process. So I certainly think it's, they may be supportive, they may not be supportive, they may just have questions. I did field a couple of phone calls, just people wanting to know what it was, and I explained it to them. And when I did, they indicated they didn't have any objection to it after it was explained to them. So,
I would suggest go ahead and listen to the comments of those.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you have something, right?
No, well, I just wanted to say a few things about it.
sure, go ahead.
That came to my mind. This seems like a very simple process, and I kind of agree with your opinion, okay? What I don't understand, and maybe I've missed it here because I just found the paragraph, is there any requirement, once this is approved, to file a plat?
Yeah, and
Right.
that's exactly what, if you look at the actual staff report, that's what it indicates, that they do have to comply with all items 1 through 7, and then also have to comply with section, and you'll see in the staff report that I also refer to section 10B, which is the requirements for a final plat, for the contents of a final plat. So your recommendation, should you do the endorsement, would be that you endorse the request, but also stipulate as a condition of final approval that they have to meet the 7 conditions itemized under 12B, but also they have to provide a plat consistent with 10B under the ordinance.
Yeah, and the reason for that,
Oh, yeah.
it makes sense, is as you're searching these titles and closing deals, the title companies, if there was a sale of this property or a mortgage or anything else,
Right.
would like to see some kind of plat referencing what we have left.
Right.
Or what you've created.
Yeah,
In
so.
the absence of that, you might have mortgage financing problems.
Right, no, absolutely, it does have to be, they do have to provide a plat for signature by the town, so there's format for that identified in the ordinance,
Right.
and then they do have to file the plat with the county clerk. So, yes, all of those measures are conditional. Final approval is conditional on all those being met.
So even though there's only the letter from Intranosa, they're going to also have to provide something if there's already a letter.
When the final plat, they will have to have a letter, they will have to have a letter from it. Well, if that letter is sufficient for the
Right.
surveyor, and us, we'll have to look at it and see. But if there's any
Any
other
other utilities
utility
as well.
easements or easements of record, they will have to have those signatures as well. So basically, you're approving the vacation in concept. If they provide all of the requisite documentation as identified in statute, then then the town will sign off on the plat and it can be recorded. If they don't do that, then if it's not recorded, it doesn't really exist. So
It's
yeah.
not. it's not followed through.
So, having said that, you may want to take, if we'd like to at this point, we can hear from
Yeah.
the abutting property owners.
Individuals one at a time up.
They did sign up, so we'll hear them.
Name and what their address.
Yeah, works for me.
May I ask what your name
Yeah.
is? I guess when they were doing roll call, I didn't hear.
I'm Brad Hill.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. I'm like, oh, okay.
I'm sorry, I should have done that, yeah. Okay, so the first person to sign up is A. Foreman. Yes, ma'am, if you, would you come up? Or, yeah, just, or you can stand and speak, whatever you want to do.
Oh, could you, I'm sorry.
Identify yourself
Identify
first.
yourself and your address?
Ann Foreman, 174 West Hill Ranch Road.
Thank you.
My sister and I share a home. Jean McConnell is my sister. I guess what my question is that this, looking at this piece of land, and this, it's going to be 10 acres, and everybody is kind of abutting, the people that have been notified are abutting this piece of land. My question is, do you guys decide whether this piece of land is landlocked? I mean, what is the requirement in the zoning? Could someone say to you, now that we have this 10-acre piece, that it's landlocked and we need to use one of the easements that are available to reach our land, or?
Okay, so you're speaking of land use issues that are subject to potential disputed facts?
Okay.
So only a court can resolve issues of dispute of fact.
Okay.
The zoning ordinance does not address the issue of being landlocked. The subdivision ordinance, there could be an issue for approval of a subdivision. Because this is not a subdivision, that would not be a point of inquiry. I'm not saying that it's not an issue, and I understand that, but that's not an issue that would be relevant to this action.
If, because I guess my question too is, if we're all notified of all the abutting properties, what is the purpose of notifying us? Is that just because there's going to be just a change of this vacation of the lot line? What is the intent of notifying us?
So,
Is it-
in a general sense, there is, under our what's called our early neighborhood notification ordinance, and it's also identified in the subdivision ordinance, if a matter is a quasi-judicial matter, if you are an abutting property owner, you are legally identified as an affected party. Affected party is a term of law. That means you have a right to testify in that. A quasi-judicial hearing is what it means. It's judicial in nature, where these commissioners are acting as a judge and court when a matter is quasi-judicial. And so under statute, abutting property owners are legally entitled to testify in that hearing, in that judicial hearing. This is not a judicial hearing, so what we're hearing is basically concern and comments. And if you have questions, which you do, and that's what we're here to try to do, is answer those questions. And I can only answer general questions. The applicant is not here to answer specific questions. And so that's what kind of creates a burden on us. But if we hear something, an interior lot vacation is a fairly simple and routine kind of matter. The zoning doesn't change. The use of the land doesn't change. What it does mean is, instead of two houses being built, potentially on those two sites, only one house can now be built. So it is a reduction in density. It is in a sense, it gives them the enjoyment of a larger lot. That's the motivation to do something like that. They do lose the economic potential of selling a property and still having a property. So it's, it's something that the applicant apparently weighed and said, the idea of having a larger lot is better than, being able to sell the property. We basically don't want to have neighbors, maybe is what they're saying. And we want to, we want that space, and that's their prerogative. And so it's not outside, it's hard, it would be hard for, and the baseline of any land use decision is based on three things. It can do no harm to the community, it should have community benefit, and what's the other one? It doesn't adversely affect health and safety. So I think if under those three items, an interior lot line vacation, it would be really difficult to say that any of those conditions are adversely met. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
I just have one more question
Sure.
and then I'll shut up. There is an easement that if you look at it, it is a shorter easement. It's between Gene McConnell and Christina and Christopher Gabaldon. It's on the north
Right.
side. Could that, it's a private access utility easement, could that be requested to be used as an easement to that property? Is that possible? I mean,
It is an access easement. It's a private access easement. So yes,
So yes, it could be
yes,
requested.
it's already could be. So this doesn't change that fact.
Okay, but because that's on the map.
Right.
Zoning wise, they could request to use that easement to.
Not zoning wise. That's law. They have the legal right to do that. That has nothing to do with zoning.
And who would be responsible for the cost of, like, if the road, building the road along that easement?
That would be up to there's multiple ways that could be done. If an easement is in existence, and if any party, if I decide I want to go grade that road, make it a good road, because the easement exists, legally I have a right to do that. So anybody has the right to do that. Who would be likely to do that? It would be the person who probably needs the road. They could not impose that cost on anybody else.
But they can just say,
The community could through certain circumstances, but a private landowner could not force any other party to pay for the cost of that road.
all right, but it, since the easement is,
The easement is recorded, so the basic tenet of real estate law is caveat emptor, which means buyer beware. So when you bought that property, that easement would have been disclosed to you. If it wasn't, then that's a separate issue. But it would have been disclosed to you, therefore you agreed to it at the time of the purchase of your property.
okay. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
And the next person is. Oh. Okay, Ms. Mack, are you Ms. Mack?
I'm collaborating.
Okay, I understand. And then, is it Mr. Mirabal? It's not commercial, that was an error. That was just a typo.
Who would incur the cost of moving the fence if they do make a road on the easement?
Is the fence on the easement?
It is on both properties.
Okay, so they would have to move the fence in order to build that road.
So would she have to hire somebody to move the fence? Or would the person wanting to make the road?
The person wanting to make the road could just remove the fence across the easement.
Really?
They have a right to do that because that's an access easement.
Okay.
If it was just a utility easement, then they have a right to possibly take the fence down, but typically a utility will replace a fence if they're replacing a line.
My name is Chris Mirabal. I live
Yes,
at
sir.
180 West
Okay.
Road. And we walk around that area a lot.
Yeah.
And they've already cleared the majority of the lot, and they have what looks like a giant metal building on premises already.
So we weren't sure if it was.
When did they put the metal building on premise?
Well, the metal building is in pieces.
Oh, okay, so it hasn't been
It's not being
built,
constructed.
it's being stored.
All, the majority of the
Okay.
land already.
That, thanks for clarifying, that was,
Oh,
that'd be
yes. And it looks to be like it's gonna be a really big building.
As long, and the size of the building
So you
is,
said that they can make one house,
yes. But they can have they can have accessory buildings.
a barn, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and the requirement for size is basically dictated by the setback requirements, which is basically 30 feet on the front, 15 on the sides, and 10 on the back. It would have to be nobody would build a building that size unless you were a Walmart, so.
Let's hope it's not
Yeah.
Walmart.
Yeah, and there, because we've walked up, and their
Sure.
septic is adjacent to the property line of that property. So they would end up having to move, I think, make another septic area.
If they build in an area where is there a current residence on this?
No,
Okay, so is there a current septic tank then?
yes.
They just put it
It looks like
Oh,
one
okay.
that's been there, yeah.
Okay. There's one that they just put in, or it's been there?
It looks like they just dug it out.
Okay. So they should have gotten a permit, a development permit from us to do that. We will make sure that occurs before any structure goes up.
And they recently did dirt work with a backhoe, and I'm thinking they already put electricity ready over there
Okay.
as well.
Yeah, they should have, that should have required a development review, but it's a little ambiguous when that needs to, typically you want to do that before any work starts.
Yes.
Um,
Okay, just,
But if anything starts going up
yeah.
vertical, we would definitely issue a cease and desist until they did a development review. They can't get a building permit until they come through us anyway.
Okay.
So whoever builds the building is going to have to get a building permit, whether it's the homeowner or a contractor, and they cannot get a building permit from Construction Industries unless we sign off on it. So we will see it first.
Just
Yes.
one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So is that still town of Edgewood?
Yes,
Okay.
it is a very kind of weird
Yeah,
little,
because we were looking into putting a building on our area, and they told us we were right at the boundary.
you're in
of-
Santa Fe,
of,
unincorporated Santa Fe County. You get to drive to Santa Fe to do this.
Okay, because we were told we were right at the edge of town of Edgewood.
Yeah, well, you're on one side of the line or the other, so.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're in Santa Fe County, you have to go through Santa Fe County land use. Good luck with that.
Oh, okay.
Good luck with it.
Sweet.
I just had one more comment, if I may ask. When Hill Branch Road was paved, so Hill Branch Road, where the easement is, that easement starts actually in the pavement, but it's where the big culverts were put.
Mhm.
And it's a big low area where rain catches when it rains. Will that be affected at all, or will they just fill in, move the culverts? I mean, what will happen?
They can't move the culverts, so
Okay, so-
if the culverts are in the drainage easement,
They'll have to go around
Yes.
somehow. They'll have to
Yes.
make a way around.
yes.
And the 40-foot easement, it's 40-foot is what it looks like here.
Right.
So that would be 20 feet on each side of the different properties, 20 feet on the Gabaldons and 20 feet on the McConnells.
Mhm.
I'm a neophyte, please forgive me for
Yes.
this.
Yes.
I don't understand that stuff, but I'm just clarifying it.
Mhm.
So it'd be 20 feet.
Yes,
on
that's what it appears to be, yes.
each property.
Mhm.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any questions from the commissioners for staff? Again, I did want to bring your attention to what the ordinance said. I think you've asked all the pertinent questions, so yes, there is, it is a 2-sentence requirement in the statute. And it does, of course, the plating is much more detailed. And of course, the information that has to be provided is identified statutorily. So that has to, all of this, if you look at the staff report. I have it here somewhere. I think I may have handed out my last staff report. Thank you. So if you look at the staff report, it says final plat approval is subject to satisfaction of the 7 criteria under 12B, items 1 through 7 of ordinance 2019-04, and plat shall comply with provisions under 219-04, section 10B, contents of final plat, and section 12B, vacation. So it just reiterating back. What we will do is, if you would like to make a motion and vote on the endorsement, it would be for an endorsement of a lot line vacation. Then I will come back at the next planning and zoning meeting with the conclusion of vacation. There's a form that we have. That would be filled out. You would approve that at the next meeting. And then once the final plat comes through, we will put a signature line on the plat for the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission to sign off on the plat. So you will have review of the final plat. So,
just for my curiosity, it's not official until it's filed with county clerk and signed off.
Well,
I mean,
that's a gray area. Technically, it's official, but until it's
filed.
recorded, it's disputable. So, I mean, there would be no reason that you would not want to record a plat. They would not be able to get a mortgage. They would not be able to, do anything unless they just paid cash as they went and didn't care. So,
Part of the reason I ask is I've thought about, there's lots that are next to each other. You buy a couple of them and
right.
combine them.
Yeah, and it's a fairly common and typical thing to do. And again, it's hard to imagine. I'm sure there's cases where you could say, okay, it's harmful to the community, or or that it's a public safety. I don't know. I mean, you can imagine scenarios, but probably 98% of the time it meets all of those 3 kind of land use oversight requirements. So
do we want to entertain a motion?
I'd like to speak on the matter. She didn't show up, right?
she did not show up. And again, if this was a action that was identified differently in the ordinance, let me give you another example, and one that's kind of comes to mind because it's something that's kind of current. But as you know, we had this situation where we had a amendment to a master plan from a very large landowner in the town of Edgewood. So if you go to the ordinance and you look at amendments to master plans, all amendments to master plans are done administratively by the planning and zoning manager, with one exception: if there is a change in a land use. If there's a change in land use, the statute says it has to be approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it's just, and the reason I point that out, it's an example of a fairly major kind of internal adjustment, land use adjustment, that is done administratively. And a lot of things can be done administratively, and this is really an administrative function. So if there was a lot line adjustment that was not internal, if you're doing a non-internal lot line adjustment, you're doing a subdivision. So you can't, so you can understand why that's identified very differently, because that can have an adverse effect. So.
Well, going back to what I was thinking, because they brought up some really good points, and it sounds like there's a lot of confusion even from the neighbors as to what's going to happen to that property. Sounds like a lot of activity going on over there. And I would think that individual, now that we know what they've seen, what they've observed as neighbors, I would probably move to table it and have her come in and speak to the matter. And I think we have some really good tools as to questions to ask as to what they've shared with us prior to moving forward. That's just my thought.
So, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, you said basically we're disturbing some of the neighbors. I think they were curious, but are we really, anybody issue, a complaint?
Well, let me ask it this way, just to understand your concern. So, having heard what you've heard today, and understanding that that easement is not a fact, that the actions taken by this request has no effect on that easement, on that existing easement. It only has an effect on the internal lot line. Do you have any objection to the vacation of that internal lot line?
Here's what my feeling is. I think that the lady who has sent out the letters, if she's not represented here, it's almost like she's leaving you to represent her.
And I can't do that.
And you can't do that, and yet you are, by expressing what you're expressing, it sounds almost like she left you to represent her. And I think that they should be here to answer questions of their neighbors.
Okay.
I think that is a neighborly thing to do.
Mhm.
I think
Okay.
if you sent the intention,
Because there are questions that I can't, you're absolutely right, there's questions that I can't and should not answer.
right, and I think that the intention to send out letters was an invitation to neighbors to come together and say yes. I know there were a couple of neighbors who were unable to come, but I think that she should represent and be willing to answer those questions.
Okay.
And it sounds simple. The vacation of the lot line sounds absolutely simple, but I think that there is an impact.
And you're right, for me to try to identify what their motive is, and I kind of speculated,
Yes,
but I can't speak to it.
exactly.
So you are absolutely correct. That's a very astute observation. So that's worth considering. So it's up to the commission to make that decision.
If I might ask real quick, with regards to this easement, and you said it's not going to be affected here, and I understand that, but they would even have access to it on their on the A
Correct. They have access now.
regardless. So
So the legal aspect of the easement will not change regardless of whether this vacation occurs or not.
what do you guys think?
It's a bit. These are tough.
Yes.
Well, I think Commissioner Chavez had a good point, which had better conversation with the adjoining properties, is that, there may be some questions that we may have of the homeowner, but, and not the homeowner, but the property.
The applicant.
The applicant is not here, so we can't assume anything.
Mhm. Yeah, all we have is the application.
Yeah,
So
that's all we have.
the only information you have is the application. There are protections through the plating process and the requirement of the
Yeah,
conditions
and
that are
building
imposed.
and so forth, yeah.
But, if it's an inconvenience for them to wait 30 days to come back and have this done, then, that's your prerogative, so.
Well, often there are situations where people can't be present, okay? And somebody that lives out of state for a simple lot line, it's not an adjustment, it's actually a vacation. If somebody might live in North Carolina, but they want a larger lot or combine the two they bought and this kind of thing. So I don't think we should make a big deal out of not being present, as long as we understand fully that they're complying with what is
Well,
required.
and what we're
in
saying is
planning
they
and
will
zoning.
have to comply before it is final approval is
If we
done.
do,
Yeah,
if we approve an endorsement.
an endorsement.
It would be stipulated. that they would
So that's a good point. So an
comply.
endorsement is not actually granting the vacation. The endorsement is just saying in concept, you are not, you're okay with an internal lot line vacation. So I probably erred in not conveying to her the necessity or the advantageousness of being at the meeting. And like I say, this was an interesting point of discussion at the conference I was at, because there had been, mixed feelings about whether the person is present or not. But in a quasi-judicial, it is pretty much the legal opinion that they have to absolutely be there, just as in a court of law. If you don't show up, you don't get your trial. Now, your attorney can represent you, and an attorney can represent you in an application as well. You can have an agent represent you, but the agent or the applicant has to be there to represent their position, or it cannot be heard. This is different, so.
Right, and the agent does not have to be an attorney. You said
No.
it doesn't have an attorney.
Anybody can be an agent.
Represents them that they designate, right?
Yes, correct.
So, I don't know if you guys saw that Bill and Catherine Brown are at 160 Hill Ranch Road, so they're not out of the state or anything. They're actually neighboring. They're actually a butt against the
Yeah.
property as well. This is their children's property, is what I understand. But that's all.
Yeah, no, I think it's it's up to you. I mean, it is a delay for the applicant, but it's a delay that I'm not going to say they caused or didn't understand. They maybe didn't understand innocently, whatever. I don't think they were trying to hide anything, but it certainly is. It is what it is. It's a 30-day delay. In today's world, what isn't being delayed currently, but it's up to you. Again, it's up to you.
I believe if we choose to delay this tonight, then we need to make it clear to applicants in the future to be present, because I do feel a
Yeah.
lot line vacation on an interior of a lot is not a major issue.
Right. Okay.
It's quite
Right.
doable and legal. However, if we want to do that for everybody to feel
And
a part.
I have found myself in this position a couple of times where I feel like I'm maybe crossing I thank you for pointing it out, where I'm actually testifying and either against, for, or and I don't want to be in that position. So we can make it a policy, and what I would advise is, and we'll talk about this after this matter, as we move forward with recommendations for changes to the ordinances, we can spell these things out much clearer. I mean, this is what we do. We see, okay, this is a bit of a flaw in the ordinance because it doesn't indicate one way or the other. We need to be specific in the ordinance, and that way there is no confusion.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
and as Commissioner Seegers had pointed out, if they are away, I mean, I think is there some kind of guidance as to
They could
if
call. They could even call.
like a Zoom call type deal?
Sure.
Or, okay. I'm new, so I'm asking a lot of questions.
No, that's good. So you guys. So again, since this is a little bit different, I don't know if you have to. The affirmative motion that you would make would be to table, if you want to do that. There's two affirmative. There's the action you could take is an affirmative motion to endorse, and you could either vote yay or nay, or you can make an affirmative motion to table. Again, all motions should be affirmative.
I'm going to stand by my original
There is a motion on the floor
and
to
to
table.
table it.
Okay, all right. Do we have a second to Commissioner Chavis's motion? I believe I'll second it.
Okay. Then you call for the vote.
And go ahead and vote. Commissioner Allman?
Nay.
Commissioner Seegers?
Aye.
Commissioner Benino?
Nay.
Commissioner Chavez?
So, yes.
And I will vote yes.
Okay, so the motion fails.
Motion fails.
So the next item, and then since you chose not to table it, there needs to be an affirmative motion to approve the lot line vacation.
Approve the endorsement.
Yeah, approve the endorsement.
I'll make a motion to approve the endorsement.
I'd second that.
Okay.
And we'll call for a vote. Commissioner Chavez?
Nay.
Commissioner Menino?
Yay.
I will say nay.
Aye.
Commissioners? Aye. Severs? Aye.
I'm for the endorsement.
You're for the, okay. Commissioner Holland?
Okay, so the motion passes, so there is a recognition that there is an endorsement from the Planning and Zoning Commission. Just so you know, if there are questions that you have, please email me or call me, and I will be happy to mediate with the applicant. I mean, this is just something that I'm willing to do. I don't have to do that, but I understand, I think just to be good neighbors, I think that hopefully that's what they want as well, but you know, they can choose not to be good neighbors as well. But they will have to, you do understand, they will have to comply with all the requirements. And this is going to cost, this is a significant survey requirement, so they will have to pay a professional surveyor as required by the ordinance. Any existing other easements and your lot lines will be identified, so that will have to be done before any final plat is approved. Okay? Good, thank you very much.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Since you said you walk around it, so on your property lines, you can see over into their lot and you can see that there's already been movement of earth and was this cul-de-sac, it already existed up here, do you know, on Coley Court? Yeah, I do. Okay. All right.
So I believe I own this property. Yeah, all of it, yeah.
It must be a hill piece.
I think I personally owned it.
Coincidence that Hill Ranch Road is the same name, your name.
No.
Quite a coincidence.
But I'm a Williams, and the Williams Ranch Road is not related to my end of the Williams.
And one of my proudest achievements when I was mayor was to get Hill Ranch Road paved.
Oh.
That's awesome. We need to do Horton now.
Yeah.
And you know what? It is actually on our priority list. We want to be able to have Horton paved all the way from basically 344, where it comes in front of Rax, all the way to Frost Road.
Wow.
It'll give relief, north-south relief from 344.
And extend the bike trail on Horton.
Yes,
That's
yes,
really
we
nice.
want to. Yeah, we do want to extend our trails.
Not that we have a wish list.
Yeah.
Oh, and so law enforcement on the Hill Ranch would be nice because people fly.
Yeah, yeah.
We appreciate you guys.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you for coming out.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Do we have public comment at this point?
Is any other public comments? Okay. I think I did introduce Mr. Campbell.
That's okay.
Yeah, Mr.
I
Campbell.
can't remember your name either.
Yeah. I'm Brad.
I know.
And this is Mark. Mark lives over at the air park, and he came into the office with a lot of good questions, and we had a good discussion, and indicated that we were still seeking people to be interested on the Planning and Zoning Commission. We do have 5 full members now, but we do have a provision in the ordinance for an alternate member. So if anybody needs to miss a meeting, please, convey that early enough to where we can notify the alternate. We only have to have 3 present to have a quorum, but it's always, I think tonight's a great example. And there should, I like the fact that there's not unanimity in every item. I think everybody has a point of view, and I think we have to respect that. And it gives good give and take, and I think the public appreciates that kind of interaction. So I just want to recognize that. So anyway, I know you may have to leave, but we're going to talk about some really interesting zoning concepts here in a minute. So, So I don't think there's any public
No
comment.
public, okay. All right, so do we have any, okay, so we're at the matters from the chair and commission members. Are there any matters from the commission members?
Thank you, appreciate your time.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
thank you. So are we still good with Thursdays, the second Thursday of the month? I'd like to be consistent, and it seems to be working out pretty well. Do you want us to start a little bit later? Is that helpful
No,
for you?
This is my first week back at work.
Okay.
So I played catch up a little bit.
Okay.
And then they decided to start paving the freeway, so.
Oh, yes, that's a
yeah,
nightmare.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a nightmare, yeah.
And 66 backs up to Harris horribly.
Yeah.
I experienced that.
Yeah.
today. Yeah.
Would 6:30 be more convenient to you?
No, I'm actually changing my schedule anyway to go in earlier and leave
Oh.
earlier
Okay,
going forward, so.
okay, okay. All right,
It's
good.
fine. Thank you.
Yeah, we want to, if there's any issues like that, just, let's have those out in the open so we can accommodate you guys. Because it's your time that we're taking here, so. Anything else? from you guys?
Any other matters from the commissioners?
I.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what I had indicated, the kind of the overall concept of zoning, and I indicated those three kind of major, so the law basically says that we have what are called police powers, and when we say police powers, it doesn't mean law enforcement. It means that as a government, we have the right to control certain things. So one of those things is land use. And land use, again, the basic concepts that the Supreme Court has said that a community can address are health and safety, community benefit, and no harm. So as long as everything, so if you kind of keep that in your mind, the idea of zoning is not to be punitive. It's certainly not to be, it should be as least restrictive as possible, but still meeting those kind of basic requirements. I'm going to, I'll do this in a little bit later, but you see that I've identified Euclidean zoning versus planned use zoning. So Edgewood is 100% Euclidean zoning. Euclidean zoning is kind of the original type of zoning. So if you're wondering where the term Euclidean comes from, the first municipality to have their zoning ordinance go all the way to the Supreme Court was Euclid, Ohio. And Euclid, Ohio had what were called district zones, just as Edgewood does. So Euclidean zoning is what we have, which is a bunch of different colors. And within each one of those colors, there's certain permissive uses and there's certain restrictive uses. So in the world today, well, let's say 20 years ago, probably 85-90% of zoning throughout the United States was Euclidean zoning. Today, non-Euclidean zoning is probably about 65-70% of zoning, and Euclidean zoning is in decline, and planned use zoning is in ascendancy.
Is there a distinct difference between the
Yes.
two?
Yes,
Okay.
there is a very.
I did a little bit of
Yeah.
research, and I was having problems pinpointing
And it's not. Yeah, it's not.
the distinctive difference.
Exactly. So there's what's called, I don't know if you've ever heard the term PUD or PUD. So it's called planned use districts. So instead of Euclidean zoning, planned use districts is basically where a developer comes in and proposes what to do on a lot, could be a lot or it could be a district. So it could be an assemblage of properties and saying, we've got this neighborhood, we want to put in parks, we want to put in some senior housing, we want to put in some residential services, we want open space, we want farmland. So the concept is we're not going to say we're going to do one thing in this district, we're going to do multiple things. Here's our plan, here's our proposal. And so that proposal comes forward as what's called planned use. So that kind of is the concept that you need to think of, it's planned use. So you have in a Euclidean zoning, if you're going to violate the specifics that are identified under a zoning district, you have to request what's called a variance. And a variance has very specific legal requirements and connotations, where in a planned use zone, those variances are just part of the process. So you can say, okay, yeah, we can do up to, and typically it's identified in statute, we can say, well, we can give you up to 4 variances in a PUD. So so you can basically do some creative setbacks. You may want to have, maybe more open space, more there's a lot of different things. So what we look at as the municipality, as the governing government, and the benefit to the government is we can say, okay, we're going to encourage you to provide more public benefit. Public benefit being identified as maybe paved roads, wider sidewalks, parks, things that you say, okay, this is going to make our community more attractive. And so therefore there's a public benefit there. And so by us getting a public benefit, we're willing to provide you, the developer, with more variance type of, variance from the norm. So we're not going to dictate to you what you have to do on setbacks, on road sizes, on accesses, things like that. So it's basically, this is where the world has come to. Developers like to come forward, and they will, some developers will try to push the envelope like way too much. We'll say, yeah, we just want to build a high rise, lot line to lot line. Okay, that's probably not going to be, doable in a lot of communities. The idea is, okay, there's a lot of, we can give examples as we go forward. There's a lot of even buildings that are mixed use. So in more urban environments, you'll see maybe retail on the first floor, offices on the second floor, apartments on the third floor. And they're setback. They're not just straight up and down, they kind of pyramid back and kind of creative and aesthetic ways. And because they're adding amenities, maybe sidewalk, part of the restaurant on the first floor has sidewalk seating and open air seating and things like that. It becomes attractive with landscaping and different things like that. So the concept is attractive and creative and modern. And so because of that, you're willing to allow 3 different types of uses basically in one building or one structure. So those are the kinds of things that developers are looking for today. I mean, we can have a community where everything is just chopped up into 2-acre lots, 1-acre lots, and there's a house on each lot, or a manufactured house on each lot, or whatever. And we have a lot of that in Edgewood, but I think there's some, and I will bring you some concepts that are really attractive. What you're seeing a lot of. And I'm not saying that that there aren't issues, but in the Las Vegas area, in the Phoenix area, a lot of what's happening now with senior type housing is like more cluster with farm and garden spaces. So there's like really attractive farm garden spaces, some communal use, a lot of open space. It's just with the same average density. But it's just a different aesthetic, and I think it has the ability to be, make us a little bit unique. We have and I brought your attention last time the geographic size of Edgewood. So we have 64 square miles, and we have 6,400 residents. That's 1 square mile per resident average, if you think about it. Now, we're not going to put one person on every square mile, but I mean we do have a massive open space. One of the and I didn't bring this to you, but I will try to bring you kind of things that are unique to Edgewood. One of the things that I have found is that of all of the municipalities in New Mexico, if you identify the highest point of altitude in every municipality, Edgewood has the second highest point. Second only to Red River Ski Valley. We're
Yes.
14 feet higher than Red River at the top of South Mountain. At 8,740 feet. So it's a unique feature that we have, and it's a huge open space that will have to be there forever. So,
It reminds me of numerous years ago when there was a developer that wanted to put a lot of apartments behind what was going to eventually be Walmart. And there was a lot of, no. But I think if you can pull in these mixed-use areas, because apartments are something we sorely need in this area.
yeah, I should have, let me see if I can find this, and this is, I'll try and bring it to you in a little bit better.
With that type of concept.
But this is, and I'm sorry, I can't blow this up any, but this is kind of what we're talking about for a semi-rural area. So this is actually a senior housing project in Virginia. This is communal, and if you get on the sides here, you actually will see I can't do it now, but you can actually see the apartments. There's like apartments on both sides, but you have this rural farm atmosphere that everybody has this common property. Nobody's doing, they're doing that a little bit in the South Valley of Albuquerque in the Bosque Farms area. But Edgewood is, Edgewood, we have the opportunity to do something really unique like that.
Do you foresee any difficulties with how we're currently laid out with establishing that type of a concept?
Well, I think if you look at if you see all of that open vacant land.
There's lots of open land, yeah.
So, are people going to still want to come in and do traditional subdivision? Should they? Yes, absolutely.
They always will, sure.
But I think what you also, if you have that opportunity to do something that's attractive, and I don't want us to be just a senior community, but this type of housing can also be attractive to first-time home buyers.
So that would also allow for some commercial
Oh, yeah.
within those areas.
Yeah, residential services.
Rather than
Yeah.
having Edgewood, all the.
Yeah, I mean,
in one spot.
Yeah, I think we have examples of that in Edgewood.
We do.
But I think that's the kind of thing
Yeah.
that would be nice, is to be
Yeah.
able to have, like the Church Street markets in different locations.
Commercial
And
areas.
because
yeah.
it gives not only breaks up and makes the community more interesting, but it creates a lot of employment opportunity and business opportunity.
And that's what I thought that C2 was going to be.
Yeah,
was,
no,
what are
I'm
you
sorry
putting in
about-
there?
Well, and simply even for
Yeah.
traffic flow,
Yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
beneficial for traffic flow
Yeah.
because you can tell down here now, in the Smiths and all the commercial area, the traffic is. My husband says the traffic's ridiculous.
I'm going to grab something real quick. I want to show you
But
something. This
Who
came
remembers
in
Edgewood
this
30 years ago?
afternoon within 10 minutes apart. Let me grab this.
Can I throw something out there?
Yeah.
So I'm retired, but I retired from a city in Southern California, a little place called City of Redondo Beach. Probably heard the Beach Boys song. And my job was ran the building department. So I was the building official, so I had inspectors and code enforcement officers. And just as I retired from the city, so Redondo Beach has a horseshoe pier. So we have a pier. We don't actually own the ocean. We didn't own the oceanfront property. That was the county owned that. But originally, the city, it had bungalows from the 1890s, where people would come from the East Coast, pull their little bungalow out onto the beach and vacation for the summer, and then they would pull it back. And then the city developed up. At a certain point in time, they allowed, almost like Honolulu, there are 12-story condominium apartments along the coastline. And the residential neighborhood said, no, we don't want to be this anymore. We want to be a small little, not necessarily bedroom community, but we want these smaller bungalow homes. We don't want to be Oahu,
The
Hawaii.
skyscrapers.
What my point is and I'm backing up Brad here, is that as I was retiring, there was a development that came in to redo the pier and put in residential, hotel, and shopping, close to 30,000 square feet, huge. All multi-stuff with a walkway through there. And this is the concept that he's talking about, because they were gonna they would put in money to fix the pier, and they would do public works parts, but it gave them an opportunity to make it a viable project instead of coming in and saying, you can only do this.
Right.
So they can bring in businesses, so they have rental income, they have apartment income, and then they have retail income. And so it's a more viable way to look at a piece of property, instead of saying, it's only gonna be C, and you can only do this, and you have to go through all of this variance to get anything like that.
So there's a lot of pluses to it. So anyway, let me just point this out real quick. So this one came in, and then like 10 minutes later, this one come in, and then of course this one is this parcel. So these are literally across the street from each other. So this is going to be, I believe, a Starbucks,
Oh, you're kidding.
and
Oh
this
my
is going to
goodness.
be a car wash.
It's Champion.
Oh, it's
isn't
gonna be
it?
a car wash. Oh.
Yeah.
So they've already got approval and
So,
everything, or
so
they're just
thinking
in
about
there?
if we had, so this whole Plaza Loop, which Mr.
Plaza
Seegers
Loop,
may have some
yeah.
familiarity with,
A little bit, right?
A little bit.
but the whole Plaza Loop, I think, is an example of what, if this had been done 20 years ago, where this was a planned use development,
Yeah.
you can see where there could have been, now we're going to have a brew pub there, or a tap room, I should say. The pub, the brew will be in Albuquerque. And so it's going to be some mixed use, but if it had been planned from the very get-go, it would be done, and it would be really kind of cool and funky right now. So
Yeah, yeah.
Look, many of these concepts are very good on paper, but they fail when the market dictates what's really going to work, and people dictate. And one of the things I think I caution us to, as we're thinking of planning, there's an awful lot of stuff in the urban planner's mind that'll probably never happen here in Edgewood. And our comprehensive plan and the things that people say when they come to our meetings is we want what we have. And I think they can't
well,
have that.
I think
but-
what people want is what we identify Edgewood as is what's called a sub-rural community. So we have urban communities, we have suburban communities, we have rural communities, and we have sub-rural communities. Edgewood is a sub-rural community, so we want the rural feel. I don't think anybody.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, that's why I tried to show you that picture. I mean, the concept of there being a farm or a open space where there, because a lot of these are themed. For example, there will be one that is built around a lake or a pond. Well, that's probably not going to happen in Edgewood. Or you'll have one that's built around a golf course. Well, that's probably not going to happen, except in Campbell Ranch. That's not going to happen in Edgewood. So what we can do is have a farm-to-table garden. You can have, just a open space. You could even have cattle or whatever. I mean, you could have a small ranchette kind of thing. But so the theme would be kind of within the feel of Edgewood, but still give you that
think-
option.
And I
Well, one of the
guess,
things- go ahead.
what I've been out here 17 years, and I was in Rio Rancho when it exploded. So I saw areas of Rio Rancho that they attempted something like that, but they never carried through.
So-
It never completely,
And you're right.
yeah,
You're right. And Ray's right as well.
yeah.
So you have to understand this is not, so a lot of the ones that have failed because they have been basically planned and guided by the local government. So you get government planners to come in and say, and there's, Las Cruces is the classic example. In late 1960s, they demolished and just flattened their downtown area. And they created a downtown mall which consisted of a covered sidewalk. Well, it sat as a disaster for 20-some years. It was a huge failure. Now they've kind of made it, by bringing in public-private partnerships, they've kind of brought it back, but it took, they lost basically 30 years of development in their downtown corridor by letting, because it was a governing body decision during the what we look back as urban renewal back in the 70s. So that's not what this is. This is basically the landowner comes in and says, I have a concept. I think I've seen this. I went and visited this. It's really cool. It's really hot. People are there are waiting lists to get into these places.
I visited the Domain in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Which is a very unique,
Right.
very successful
Yes.
place, and it's the urban
Right.
version.
Right.
Where
Right.
I mean, it's almost a closed community.
Right.
Where you have everything that you need,
Right.
including work.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely doable.
Right.
I know that, I'm confused as to where the city center. I think the city center here has been kind of.
Well,
like us here, there.
yeah. So
So if we.
there
I would
was
love
a
to
there
see
was a
some-
Section 16 plan. So the concept
Yes.
was always that Section 16 would be the city center.
Right.
So where the fire station, where First Choice is, where the animal control facility, the courtroom, and we have
And this is
this
part of
building.
Section 16.
This is part of Section 16, but this is owned by the school district. The school district has decided to tear, this down. They can give us 2 years' notice, and we're going to be in metal buildings operating the town until we can build a public facility, because there's no way we can do it in 2 years. So, but the intent and the plan, there actually was a very significant planning process for just Section 16, where we would have municipal facilities. First Choice would have a wellness center, like a pool and, wellness center. We would have our facilities, a community building. All that stuff is planned for Section 16 with equestrian trails, walking trails, hiking trails, community farming. I mean, all of that was part of the Section 16 plan. So that's, I think,
So that's
when
pretty much
when a new administration came in and said, well, we want town center to be on my property rather than on the communal property. This is publicly owned property. So I think the push is going to be to go back to, let's put it on public property. That's, in the whatever wisdom there was in our ancestors creating these school sections, 2 school sections in every township, this being a school section. So this was always identified as a public common. So we need to use it, hopefully, as a public common. So to answer your question, I think there'll be a commercial center, obviously, where these things are going in, where we're seeing, I actually had somebody walk in today, and they're bought a piece of property just south of the Walgreens, and they're going to be putting in a Mexican restaurant.
Yay.
Yeah. So I think, I think there's opportunities for banks to be in that corridor, restaurants. That's going to be a more of an urban type, for
'Cause it's already
lack of a better
somewhat
term.
established.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And that's where it should be. I mean, the old 66, 344 is kind of the main intersection, and that's, and so branching out from there. But I think as far as the public commons, and I don't know, I lived in Boston for 3 years, and so I I appreciate that commons concept, the Fenway. I don't know if you know what the Fenway is, but it's it's basically a public park. But the common, so those are the kind of things where I think if we have some identified common areas, that's to our benefit. There's plans to major expansion to our soccer fields, and you put baseball fields, put facilities there for, and when we do have an event there, we've had some major events there, and those create a sense of community. So I think that's what so I think to answer your question, the commons type of area would be here, whereas the commercial area may be where it's developed, right?
Well, with Euclidean, what we are or have done is one thing, but I think there's room especially in this type of community, you know, to have performance zoning
That's
as a portion.
perfect. That's exactly what this is.
Yeah, right. As a portion of the zoning classification. You start out there and you don't throw out 1, 2, 3, or 4 exceptions. You realize that as things change and things are needed, that you'd be more than happy to have exceptions, okay?
Right.
Because what you're really trying to do, well, everybody seems to try to do in small towns, is borrow something from other places, and a lot of it has failed, okay? Concepts of urban planning have failed. The high-rise that had shops on the bottom and
So I think
apartments on top,
I
they
think
can't rent those.
I agree. So what I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's examples of that up and down Central. So, but I think what we're looking at is not urban planning. I look at it more as rural planning.
Well, I agree, there should be a school
Yeah.
of rural planning.
Yeah,
And we have an opportunity here.
yeah,
If we keep that in mind, to create a concept that is not in the Urban Land
Right.
Institute.
No,
of
I-
all
no, I understand.
Examples of doing, because I was a member of that for 15
Yeah.
years.
yeah.
And everything that came out didn't fit Edgewood.
Well, let me just give you from my background, because when you talk about performance planning, so there's under the building codes, for years and years and years, the building codes were what were called prescriptive codes, which basically it says, okay, you dig your footing 2 feet wide, 3 feet deep. You put rebar, 2 pieces of steel in it, then you build stone. So it was it showed you exactly what you had to do. And when we got into situations where we had, where energy efficiency became a concern, because the cost of heating and cooling can be more than the cost of home ownership in some cases. So then the insulation, the prescriptive requirement for insulation increased, and it became, builders were going, this is too hard, it's expensive, I can't build a house this way. So then what came out of that was called performance-based codes. So for the energy efficiency aspect, you have what are called home energy rating systems. So they come in and they say, we're not going to tell you how to build your house. You give me, we'll get you come in with a plan, and we'll look at concepts like thermal transfers. We'll look at air infiltration. There's all of the, we'll look at the efficiency of the systems. And so they can actually do a matrix and determine, okay, this house is going to be 50% more efficient than a prescriptive home, and it's going to be less expensive to build. That's a performance-based code, and that's kind of where you have an option now. You can either build with a HERS rating, or you can build to the prescriptive standard. And there's pluses and minuses there, but the idea being that people go to engineering schools for a reason, because they learn how, what works and what does, what will fail physically and what will not fail physically. So if an engineer figures out, I can build a structure like this, and it's less expensive, but it's just as stable, I should be allowed to be able to do that. And so that's a performance-based standard. So we're kind of trying to impose that concept into land use as well. So as long as the performance is there, as long as the traffic flow is good, as long as we're not, again, creating adverse impacts on maybe night skies, all the things that we can look at, that we want in a rural community. I think, and Gallup has done a pretty good job on this. Las Cruces has done an interesting job on this. So does that mean that they're automatically going to transform their community? They're too far down the road to really massively transform, but they can do some. We're at the stage where we have great challenges and great opportunities here. So, if we don't do this, then we're just, what Edgewood's going to look like. It's going to be
California.
It's not going to be California, because we're never going to have that high density, because we have to be on low density lots. But to have 2 acre lot after 2 acre lot after 2 acre lot can be a little bit monotonous. So, and it eliminates a lot of open space that we really I mean, we don't own, we own some open space and we have some designated, but most of that open space is privately owned, that they could come in and under our current zoning and just, do 2-acre lot subdivisions. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, there's a place
We
for
want
that.
More,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
well,
We want
And-
more diversity.
and I don't know, the comp plan, I mean, we heard that the whole time. We want the balance, we want the
Yeah,
balance.
we
of
want-
things. We
and it
don't
talks
want
about
all
it-
one thing or all one the other.
And it talks about housing diversity,
Right, which we need.
which we need.
And that's a point of discussion. I think that's probably the best thing to say about that, because some don't want it.
Yeah.
But if it's aesthetically built into the community, it's much better
Here's the
that
thing.
way.
I think if you own property and you're willing to put your capital up, you should be given the opportunity to take those risks. I think some of those are private investment failures, but a lot of those are being pushed by urban planners. And some of the worst failures of communities have been ideas listed, created by urban planning. And some of the most creative aesthetically pleasing communities are communities that have haphazardly grown.
Well, can I interject for
Sure.
a second? Because one of the things that I've noticed, I've been out here for about 9 years, but the one thing that I've noticed is there's a large core group of people that reside here that kind of have this let's leave it alone kind of mentality, not really taking into consideration the younger families out here.
Sure.
And so what you had said earlier about the Venus Park and those, I love coming down here and seeing the inflatables up and
Yeah.
families out there,
Yeah.
utilizing the space, but it's way too packed, there's not enough space there.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a really good opportunity, as you had pointed out, for us to have input into the growth and do that stuff smart.
Yeah.
I know that people that I talk to, that's their main concern. There's nothing to do for small families out
Sure.
there. Where do the kids go fishing?
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And I really appreciate the opportunity in a long-winded way to have the opportunity to be able to have some input in this kind of process, because I think it would be a lot of fun.
So you also need to understand that the last comprehensive plan was completed in 2020. The process began in 2018, and we have to renew every 5 years. So if you look at from 2018, next year we need to initiate the comprehensive plan process. So part of what we need to do is next year we'll start putting together our agenda and scheduling for the input for the comprehensive plan. So this will be the opportunity for us to convey these ideas and express them to the public. I think all we can do is put the information out there, express what our opinion is. I have, and you're right, leave it the way it is. My mom used to say this all the time in meetings when people were saying that. She said, well, if that was my attitude, you wouldn't be living here. When I was born, there was 3 houses in Edgewood. And they were all owned by my family.
Wouldn't happen to be Hill Ranch Road, would it?
Well, the old homestead is still, the house is still there. It's been moved, but there was 3 houses there. So, I mean, there was 3 houses on the Bassets. There was 3 houses here, and then the Hortons had some houses up north. So, basically, what we consider to be this part of Edgewood was, and this school section was we had my family had the grazing list on the school section for 50 years. So, anyway, my grandfather's attitude was Edgewood is going to be a great place for people to raise families. And we were builders and developers, and we started Square H and started building, developing these subdivisions back in the 70s. And so that was the concept then.
You know, I'll say, I spent a lot of time out here because my aunt lived out here when I was my son's age.
Right.
And to see some of the changes that have happened between then and now, if those changes hadn't happened, I would have never moved out here.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's still, you know, my kids come play at the park once in a while here, but it'd be nice to have more for them to do.
Yes.
And I think it's great to be able to try and make better changes without making it confrontational changes.
Yeah. Well, I think
Exactly, without destroying the community, because Edgewood's really a community. I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
And I used to have this when I ran for office. I had this saying, nothing succeeds like success, and that's an old saying. I didn't make that up. But what we need is for somebody to. I mean, I think the Church Street Market is a great example of that. I mean, that didn't exist, and it's success, and so it succeeds. I mean, that's people do things, and they go, hey, that really is nice, and that's a good thing. First choice coming here. We worked really hard to get first choice here. I mean, that was probably my first engagement in public policy was being appointed to the Health Planning Commission in 1995. And that was the discussion, was bringing first choice to.
And that was one of the deterrents of people moving out here. There was
Yeah.
no medical.
Yeah.
And so with no medical, they didn't want to be that far away
Right.
from medical, so people didn't move out here.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of the community had become a retirement area, and your town's going to die.
Yeah.
It's just a retirement
Yeah.
community.
No,
It's
you
a
have to have
attrition.
diversity. And I will tell you, well, I don't want to get into that. We'll do that at another time because I know we want to try and wrap this up before too late. But anyway, let me just end with this kind of interesting little thing that came up in the conference. And so I'm going to read to you. This came out this is a New Mexico community. This came out in the newspaper on May 12th of 21, and it says, new buildings and improvements on Main Street do not tell the whole story. However, new residents numbering at least 14 have gone up during the past year, and contracts have been let for others besides, which several have announced their intention of building this summer. That community is now the second largest community in the state of New Mexico with a population of 100,000.
Wow.
Now, I didn't tell you that May 12th, 21 was May 12th, 1921. But what's interesting is in May, that came out on May 12th, 1921 in Las Cruces newspaper, where 14 houses have been built in the previous year. We've issued 37 permits for new homes in the last year. Now, does that mean we're going to be 100,000 people in 20 to 30 years? No, we're not. But it just shows what the potential may or may not be.
We see new people all the time in the market. I talk to them and I ask them because they'll say, "Oh, we just moved here," and I'll ask them, "Where did you move from?" Because I'm really curious about that. And right now the migration is from California, but this is a desirable area for people. They are looking for rural areas.
Sure.
They don't want urban right now.
Right.
They want rural, and they want to keep it rural.
Sure.
They like the land. They don't want to be cookie cutter next to each other.
Well,
because-
and a lot of our growth, quite honestly, is Albuquerque.
Yeah, it
Because
is.
people are tied to central New Mexico either by jobs or family or whatever, and they need to be in central New Mexico. But who wants to be in Albuquerque? So if you can be here with the fourth lowest crime rate in the state, as opposed to being even in the northeast heights of Albuquerque, I mean, there is no safe part of Albuquerque anymore. So it's a lot of people. That's a lot of the movement here. If you have money, you go to San Pedro Creek and Overlook and those high-end communities, and great. But they I don't want to get into that kind of demographic. And then on the other side, we've got 3 families who want to control all the water and don't want any of it to go to Edgewood. So we have these kind of unique challenges, but we just need to be who we want to be.
Well, and that was
establish an identity, basically.
that's what I forgot to say a while ago. Because coming out here, there's no identity that I've seen. I've heard people say, "Oh, we're an equestrian," or "We're a trail type deal." I don't see it.
Yeah.
So I would like to, see, is there kind of any historical things that would give Edgewood some kind of an identity, rodeoing or whatever,
Well, I mean, there's a cowboy church is now putting in a rodeo facility, but I think there's a place for that, but I think there's just a sense that people want the view shed as best they can. I mean, we don't want, we have a lot of really nuisance properties. We have a lot of, we need to address that. I have gone around and I have surveyed the top 10, and they're bad.
Is one of them off a Mustang?
That's number one.
Is it really?
Oh, yes. That is number one.
I'll have to recuse myself on that one.
Well, that's going to go directly to the, and there's dual paths to that. That one has been cited so many times. I don't know if you know, somebody actually died there recently.
Yep.
There was a suicide.
Someone shot himself in the shed.
And being able to, they couldn't even get the body out. They had to put him on a sled to get the body out because of the, it's bad.
It looks like a junkyard.
Oh, it's worse than, it looks like a trash heap. It's not, to me, a junkyard is much more aesthetically pleasing. But no, it's number one on the list. It will be, we've already talked to the attorneys about, there's two paths. There's a citation path where you can issue them a citation, like a traffic ticket, into municipal court. And that's been done multiple times on that property, and it hasn't done anything. So the other path is to go straight to the commission and have it declared a public nuisance, and that's a district court path, and then that's just a front end loader going in.
Yeah, I know that the house just next to it, the really nice home. I think it's a manufactured home, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there's a site built across the street from it.
Yeah, and it was just put in. I watched the guy weld the gate himself, and then he sold the house.
He's lucky he sold it.
Sold it,
because, well, I think he sold it. The wind might have blown away the sign, and they just didn't put it back up. I'm pretty sure it was sold. Yeah.
Well, I think there are three paths when you have something like we're talking about, public enemy number one or whatever it is. The third path is talk to those people and maybe get a community action, not punitive, but volunteering to help. Some of these people I know that have junky places, okay, can't afford to on-junk them. They're expensive and they're a little poor to start with.
The law enforcement issues are beyond that.
Say again?
There are law enforcement issues there, Ray.
Well, there could be.
And I'm not saying there shouldn't be.
Leverage, okay,
There shouldn't be, and the owner is not living there. Just so you know, the owner lives in Rio Rancho. So,
well, then the owner ends up being liable for quite a few things. All right. And actually, the tenant's going to end up not being as liable as the owner for what's going on.
I understand that. So there has to be. Obviously there are mental health issues. There are substance abuse issues. Those are not zoning issues. Those are social service issues, and I think we're cognizant that there has to be some kind of social service action. But as far as the land use is concerned, there's a very narrow path there.
I'm just thinking of solutions.
I understand, and there are properties where what we call a knock and talk can be very effective, and sometimes just a letter can be very effective. And so we want to be able, where those are effective, we want to be able to do that. I went by a house the other day, and I saw a bunch of trash piled up, and it was a nice older style brick home. And I'm driving by and I go, that's a really cool looking house, but it's got a bunch of garbage in front of it. So I went back the next day because I was going to, I decided I'm going to go back inside. I go back the next day, the pile is even bigger, and there's a bunch of people there. It was a church group, basically unloading the house. It was a hoarder house. They were unloading it and having it hauled away. but the bank had foreclosed on it, so the issue had been forced. But, you know, this church had actually was taking responsibility for, you know, providing, you know, support for the individual living there, but also, you know, taking that step. So, yeah, there are examples where you can do things beyond just, you know, going in with this particular one. If you saw the file this thick of how many years they've tried that, right? And there comes to a point where you have to
spoken
go.
with them myself because we
Yeah.
walk to the mailbox
Yeah.
and they don't want to talk
No.
to anybody
No.
at all.
Tenants, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they don't
I
want to
say,
talk
well,
to
maybe
anybody.
during COVID, because you couldn't evict during COVID, but this is obviously a long-term problem.
Well, here's the thing: the housing is not. It would not meet any housing standard. The buildings themselves would not. You could never even bring them up to building code at this point. So I mean, the only option is basically to condemn them. Yeah.
So on a more cheerful note.
Yes.
When do you anticipate, in how many years would the remainder of Church Road be paved? I know it's an arterial road for the town of Edgewood.
So when you say being paved, so part of Church Road is paved.
Right.
So are you talking, there is, you know.
Portion that is not.
Yeah, so there was money allocated for that. I don't know if you know that. So it is.
Isn't that tied up in legalities right now?
It is going to be tied up in legalities for quite a while.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I can't, there's things I can't say.
Oh, okay.
So,
And there was a proposed trail
yeah,
also,
Yeah.
which I'm assuming is tied up.
yeah. So that's going to be problematic,
Yeah.
quite to be honest with you.
That's a shame.
It is a shame. But so anyway, I think at this point we might entertain a motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Yes. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn for the evening?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Did you get that, Courtney?
So the next meeting is June 9th, I believe, something like that. So if we do, and I anticipate that we'll have some actions to review. If we do not, then what I would like to do is schedule a work session so we can get into maybe planning the comp plan protocol and also maybe have more discussions. And actually maybe we may be asked to give specific input on ordinances. And we may even bring examples of maybe Gallup's zoning ordinance. And also I might want to bring truth or consequences code enforcement ordinance.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I think we also should address certain things, like what came up tonight,
Yeah.
some fixes. okay?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Not the overall, but. you
Yeah,
know,
we
the
need to identify.
Commercial setback fix.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Needs fixing.
Yeah,
What we just went through
Yeah.
needs some fixing.
right.
So I sure, and we can we'll cause people a lot less grief
Yeah.
if we can fix those little things, because those are the type of issues that come here all the time.
Right.
And you don't want to delay a guy forever just because the planning commission, keeps pushing him
Right.
out. Don't do that. Let's
Right.
fix the way the ordinance is now. We're bound to follow the ordinance,
We are.
but we certainly can fix them
We
and
are.
make them more sensible.
Unfortunately, prior commissions did not have that philosophy. We'll get into that, but we'll get into that. You're absolutely correct. We know where the deficiencies are. I think we can fix a lot of, there's a lot of simple things that we can do.
Yeah,
Really
there's big issues
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah,
these little ones
exactly.
we can attack right away.
Yep.
Brad,
Yeah.
do you have an extra comp plan book that you can take?
Commercial setbacks.
Yeah, you must be
Thank you.
Okay. What do we need to do?
You just need to give me a more detailed interest in serving on the commission.
Okay.
It can be an email.
Yeah.
It can be an attachment to the email.
So I'm
whatever,
glad that I don't
either a letter
clarify the
or just
rest
an
of
email.
it first.
And I'll send that to the mayor and we'll get it on the
Ron
agenda.
Spelling.
Okay, so just like a resume? Or just
I think a
interest?
resume, I think it's a letter of interest. A resume is helpful.
Okay, perfect. All right. Again, I won't be here. We're leaving
That's
so
fine.
next meeting.
That's fine.
So this way they don't.
Yeah, well, obviously, there's no,
And they were good with it.
we have the luxury of having a full commission now, so. Having a,
I'm right, right, Leaders?
I'm legit.
Yeah.
Oh,
To
then
the Camp
we'll
Air
see.
Force, it's the attorney.